children without birth certificates, children without EINs that are attached to their name, or maybe a social security number. Okay, so a social security number might be seen by somebody who may be misunderstanding how things works. They might think that the social security number is needed in order for, say, a child to go to school or to get any kind of benefits and do business with any corporations. Like, it doesn't really make sense. But the way that it really works is anybody can have control of an EIN. So all of this stuff is the same thing. It's just business entities and a number that's attached to its identity. So if you've got a social security number, you can then go do things like apply for credit, right? So the thing is, you can apply for credit with an EIN as well. So if you do this with, say, a trust that you created or an LLC or something like that, you could easily use that EIN and use that as your way to create your bank accounts, do all the things on your private side that you want to take care of, right? You don't need a social security number necessarily in order to do business with, say, a credit union. So if you think like this and you know like the difference between public and private, then you could definitely reap a lot of benefits from the individual and tribal, more spiritual type of way of living. If, say, you want to make sure that you control your estate and have your estate planning in order, and say you want to amass a lot of wealth, for example, or maybe you already have, and you want to protect it, and you want to make sure that the next generation is very well taken care of as far as how they benefit from your life's existence. The things that you have control of, like your intellectual property, real property, and all that type of stuff. So if you're doing that, then you should make sure that you're handling your affairs and keep them in order. Because if you have even one house or one car, then that means that there is a significant amount of value in the lifestyle that you chose to live. So even if you don't have anything in your name, plenty of people, mind you, use a strategy in which they control things, but they don't actually have their name on it, right? And that's a whole strategy in and of itself. And you have to be a certain type of thinker in order to make sure that works for you. But a lot of people can actually benefit from that too, but I digress. But whenever you're doing these things for your family, right? Say you're giving birth to a child and the child is born into your tribe, okay? You have this private thing going on, aka your family tree expanding, and you're allowing these public servants potentially to witness the thing that's happening in your private life. So if you have a child in a hospital, then it can be, maybe some people might see it as a conflict, but the thing is, whenever you realize the position that you're supposed to sit in and you just make sure that you remind them of theirs, you can definitely still have your child in a hospital and you don't have to worry about getting a birth certificate if you don't want one. They'll offer it to you. They're more than likely offering it to you, but you don't have to accept anything that anybody offers to you. You have to always remember that whenever you're doing these things in public, on the public side, it's always some type of offer that's being given, and you have the right to accept, reject, or create the offer. So definitely keep that in mind whenever you're dealing with any corporation, whether it's a bank. I'm basically talking about anybody who doesn't have a face, right? If you're doing business with somebody who's representing the corporation, but it's not them, of course, then there's a big difference in that. And it's important to make sure you really understand what I mean by that. So if you have a child with no birth certificate, the easiest thing to do would be for you to make sure that you document this within your tribe. So you might want to do the documentation of the birth in your family Bible, for example, or your sacred text, in a book that you like the most, or anything like that. Any of that type of thing, you could make sure that you keep that aligned in your life, because it has to do with your religious beliefs, right? Whenever there's blood being involved, all this stuff is very much so spiritual. So if you have a child, that's the most spiritual thing that can happen, right? Sure. So now the child's in here and you have to give that child a name. You want to title their life. So if you're giving your child a name and they're not necessarily doing things the traditional way, or you don't want to do things the traditional way, then you're gonna have to make sure you actually know what you're talking about, for one. So that's a big one. But whenever they make you these offers, you just got to make sure you let them know, like, nah, I don't want a birth certificate, if you don't, right? And of course, just don't shame anybody if they want to do it, because it's all just strategies and stuff. But if you want to make sure that you keep the value of everything within your estate and your family and your tribe, which I highly recommend, this is what's going to be the biggest difference, is who controls their name, who controls that name. Because that's like it's like the second dimension. It's like a dimension lower than this, and it's only on paper, right? And it's like a world where all of these corporations are the ones who are the characters that's playing and stuff. So you just have to know how to play the game in the ways that benefit you for whatever it is that your objectives are. So that's super important, because it all starts at the birth. It starts at the birth certificate. And if you sign the birth certificate and get your child a birth certificate, you are then giving the title to their life to a corporation. Okay, this is what you got to understand. So then technically, if you're doing something in your private life and you use that all capital letters name, you don't own that name, right? So you could say that you are a representative, authorized representative of that corporation, and that could be valid, but it's not the same power as if you didn't have the birth certificate. Because the thing is, if you tell them to document your birth at the hospital, what they're going to do is they're going to give you a confirmation of birth, right? That's not necessarily a birth certificate, but it's just a way to prove that, like, okay, yeah, something just happened here. So if you do that, they're not going to want to put your child's name that you named them on that paper. They'll just title it baby boy or baby girl. And the reason why they would have to do that is because they don't own that name. So that's a super important thing, because if you have a confirmation of birth, that's still a valid document showing that this happened at this time in this place and stuff like that. So if you do it through the hospital route, you can still get everything you need. You can still take care of things however you want to take care of them on the financial side, but that's a whole nother thing. But the family name is preserved. You might also hear about people who want to take home the placenta. And if you give birth at many hospitals, they might tell you that you have to sign off on some papers if you want to take home the placenta, because the placenta could be seen as human remains. So if you're going to do something like, carry it out the hospital, then you have human remains on your hands. So, it's kind of more sacred and spiritual, like I keep trying to refer everything back to the spiritual side. That's the majority of what this channel is about. So whenever you do that, you can take it home. There's plenty of people who like bury it. I hear some people even like dehydrate it and then take it in capsules and stuff like that. But there's a lot of value in it. Your placenta is worth a heck of a lot of money, and I don't recommend somebody would just give it away. But people do it all the time at the hospital because they don't necessarily know what's going on with the stuff that they give them. Like if you give them your uterus, for example, or your placenta to your child and things like that. Whenever we do these surgeries, transactions, or whatever you want to call it at these hospitals, sometimes it'll be things going on that somebody wouldn't necessarily think of or know about, and trust and believe, they ain't gonna mention it to you if they don't need to. But I just wanted to make that video and just kind of give a little bit more clarity on what can be expected. And I highly recommend that through your tribe, you document your child's birth certificates. Actually, create your tribal birth certificates and all of that, the identification that you might need from passports and all of the type of stuff that you would need. You can actually get all of these things. There's so many companies that provide services that are like that, but you would just have to, actually pursue that. But if you do things on the private side, it's a totally different lifestyle. I'm sure you hear a lot of people talking about flying on private planes. There's a lot of things that make it a lot more convenient to fly on private planes than a commercial plane. So, there's a lot to think about, because it's in an entire lifestyle, really. It's not just like something I do sometimes. Like, it's a whole mindset you got to have, a lifestyle you got to live in order for it to actually be worth doing things the right way and doing things the more mature way, the things that are going to require you to bet on yourself a lot more and really depend on yourself and challenge yourself. It takes a lot of responsibility. So you got to make sure you have stuff in order. So You know, if you want to be on the foreign side of things, if you want to play both sides, if you want to be on the public and the private, if you just want to say, no, I'm out of here and be an expat, hey, whatever, bro. Whatever life you want to live. As long as you ain't judging nobody else, keep on keeping on.